Hello guys, welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be expanding on something that I started to talk about on my Twitter, which if you don't follow my Twitter, to be honest, it's probably a good life decision, but if you happen to want to follow my Twitter, there is a link in the description box below. So basically, I started to talk about some things that I didn't learn properly when I was younger, and they've affected my learning process as I've got older. And unfortunately, I can't go back in time and slap my past self and tell her to stop being lazy and work harder. But I can pass on my experience from my many failures to you guys, and hopefully that will prevent any of you from doing the same thing. So basically this video is kind of for younger artists, because I know quite a lot of my followers are young teenagers, or to people who are older but starting out in artwork, basically anyone at the start of their artistic journey. Some of it could just be seen as general art knowledge, but primarily it's aimed towards those newer artists. So one of the first things I would say is not to get fixated on developing a unique style for yourself early on. And I know a lot of people don't do that. They're happy to have flexibility in their work and for it to look different with every illustration, because I did receive quite a few comments like that on my art style video. I'm not going to ramble too much about style here because obviously I did make the whole video about it. But yeah, if you have that mindset towards your work early on, that's great, because you're not limiting yourself, whereas I went completely the opposite way. As a teenager, I had this stupid belief that I didn't need to learn basic fundamentals as long as I had a unique style, and I could just ignore all that because I actually thought I'm not drawing realistic people, I'm drawing cartoons, so I don't need to learn realistic anatomy. Somebody bought me a realistic anatomy book, and I thought, well, I'm drawing cartoons, why do I need this? And I put it in a cupboard, and it stayed there for years, and just recently I dug that book out. I was like, this is actually really useful. So don't do that if you're younger. Don't be like me and believe that as long as you have a unique style, then nothing else matters. So the interesting thing is, I actually found that my art style started to properly develop after I stopped thinking about it. When you look at a cartoon illustration, you can tell when the artist understands the basics of anatomy and so on, and then they've altered it stylistically. And you can tell when they don't understand it and they've skipped that knowledge and are just drawing what they think it looks like. And that brings me on to my next point, which is observational sketching. So when I was a teenager, I thought that referencing was something that you shouldn't do. I thought it was bad. I thought it meant that because you had outside help, it meant you were less of an artist. This is completely and utterly wrong. You can read tutorials, but ultimately looking at something through the way that another artist sees it is not going to teach you as well as looking at it yourself. You need to learn to see things the way they really are, not how you think they look. I would compare it to writing down a phrase in a foreign language that you don't understand. You're capable of writing the phrase, but that doesn't mean that you understand what it means or the deeper context behind it. And that's the same principle as copying another artist's work to learn fundamentals. Learning anatomy through another artist's style, or learning perspective or anything through the way that another artist does it, is only ever going to give you half the knowledge you need, and you ultimately cannot learn until you've done it yourself. You need to look at an item and take it down to its basic components and put it back together in your own way. Because when you, for example, look at a finished illustration by an artist, you're not seeing the construction lines behind it, you're not seeing the failed drafts, you're not seeing the thumbnails, you're just seeing those final lines, and you're not fully understanding how they went together. And so you need to look at those things in real life or photos or whatever you can access to learn those things. And from there, you can figure out how things really look rather than how you think they look. So what I do is I have a really cheap and nasty sketchbook, which I keep in my desk drawer, so I can pretend it doesn't exist when I can't see it. And I got a cheap book so that the paper is horrible and I won't feel tempted to try and make everything in it perfect, because that's what I have with my other sketchbooks. I still have a bit of a perfectionism problem with them. So if you keep this spare sketchbook separate from your others, there's no pressure to show it to anyone, and then just sketch from reference, just whatever you feel like drawing that day. Just Google it, other search engines are available, and then just sketch what you see. I would personally recommend sketching in pen, because it would prevent you from being tempted to stop to erase things, and again that stops the perfectionism urge. And also I really like drawing in ballpoint pen, I just find it quite nice and relaxing. So that's personally what I would advise, that's what works for me, but obviously everyone is different, so your method of doing observational sketching may work differently as well. Now my third point would be to work in traditional media before you work in digital. This is possibly one that people will have varying opinions on, but personally I think that I limited myself jumping into digital media too soon. Now, I'm not saying that either one is better than the other. They are both on an equal footing, they're equally difficult to learn, but personally I think that trying to jump into digital art too early can negatively affect your process, because I think it's safe to say that everyone knows how to use a pencil and paper. So when you're learning to draw, all you have to focus on is learning to draw. Whereas if you're jumping into digital, you've got to get used to using a tablet, you've got to learn the software, you're just giving yourself more obstacles that you don't need right at the beginning, and it's just gonna possibly just make you more frustrated and less inclined to continue. I started in digital media when I was about 14 or 15, and basically I got internet access at home for the first time ever at that point, and I discovered that digital art was a thing, because before that I didn't even know you could make art on a computer, and so I thought, well, this is the solution, this will make my art better. And that's a huge misconception, that your medium will improve your art. Whenever I post a review of a tablet or a tool or whatever, I get asked, if I get this, will it improve my work? No, I could create the same artwork on my £40 Trust tablet that I had 11 years ago as I could on my £1,000 Cintiq that I have now. That does not improve my art. It helps to speed up my process, I enjoy using it more, but it hasn't fundamentally improved my work. Only you can do that. If anyone says to you that you're not a real artist because you don't have £50 watercolours or a £500 tablet, well, I can't tell you what to say to them because I try to keep this channel child friendly, but safe to say they're wrong and they're an idiot. And your value of your art supplies does not dictate your value as an artist. Obviously, if you're creating work that needs to be light fast, it needs to last a long time, work that you're selling, you will need higher quality products because they need to be archival quality. But apart from that, if you're just creating work for yourself or work that you're not going to sell or you're practicing, the value of your art supplies has no impact on your core skills. And so going back to the digital media thing, I basically just put roadblocks in my own path because I jumped to digital media before I was ready, and so I spent extra time having to then figure out that medium instead of spending that time on the artwork itself. And there were a couple of years where my work just stagnated, where I did the same thing over and over again, and it's incredibly frustrating to look back on and realise you had that opportunity to progress and you didn't take it. And obviously not everyone is going to do that. You might jump into digital media and work out different techniques for using it from the get-go, but I do personally think that just sticking with basic media to begin with will just help you to focus on the one thing you should be focusing on, which is your fundamental core skills. I've just started really getting into watercolour. I mean, I'm 26 now, it shouldn't have taken me that long to get back to the root skills of traditional art, and that was because I was scared of going back to it, if I'm honest, because I didn't understand the techniques that I would use. I couldn't transition digital techniques back to traditional. It's not necessarily the same for everyone, but in a lot of cases I have seen artists go from years and years of traditional art into digital, and usually they have more success than artists going the other way around. And that's because they've learnt their basic skills and they can to some degree transfer them to digital. Like I've said, digital is still very hard to learn. No medium is better than the other. I'm not trying to create a war between digital and traditional media. You know me, you know I love my digital media. You can pry my Cintiq out of my cold dead hands. But I do think that if you learn through a process with paints and colour pencils and markers or whatever else you want to use traditionally, you can more easily transition that to digital than the other way around. Like, one of the things I said on Twitter was that I enjoy traditional media but not as much as I could do, and that's what's frustrating because I have a fear of traditional media, which sounds stupid, but because I'm so hyper aware that if I mess up I can't fix it, that makes me frightened to do anything, to be honest, because I've come to rely on the fact that I have an undo button and whatever mistake I make I can fix it. And with traditional media you learn how to fix your mistakes and you learn how to work with them, which is a really important skill. And again, something else that I wish I'd learned earlier, and it's only through, a lot of this is through my friends pushing me and telling me you need to learn how to stop being a perfectionist, you need to work with your mistakes. One of the last things I would say is to try something new with everything you create. And by that I don't mean saying, well, I can't draw trees so I'm going to draw an entire forest. You don't have to do that. Just try something subtly different with every piece that you do. And again, like I said, in 2006, 2007, I stagnated. All of my drawings were basically the same. I was churning out a lot of artwork, but it was the same characters in the same poses with the same colouring. And now what I try to do is put something different into everything I create. For example, this illustration that I'm working on here, I'm using Clip Studio for the first time, or Manga Studio, it's the same thing, and I'm trying out their inking tools. I'm trying out using a textured inking tool, which usually I like really smooth lines, and so that was something new for me. I could have stuck with Paint Tool Sai because it's my favourite and just gone, well, I like Sai, so I don't need to try anything else, but I wanted to see what Clip Studio was like, and so I'm giving it a go, which is something, again, I wouldn't have done when I was younger. And when I did my tarot card picture for the YouTube Artist Collective, I used mediums that I'd never put together before, and I tried composition effects that I wouldn't have done. And so even though that particular illustration didn't turn out how I wanted it to, I don't regret the time I spent on it because I learnt something. No piece that you do is a waste of time because you have always figured something out, and that's what I try and look at now, because I used to get very negative about my work. Now I think, okay, well, it didn't turn out how I wanted, but I did learn that particular line art technique, or I did learn that that colour works really well with that colour, and so on. Just try and look at what you got out of it rather than time you put in that you feel came to nothing, because it never came to nothing. Everything you do is building towards improving your skills, slowly and surely. Even if you can't see it, it's getting there. So every piece you do, just try something slightly different. Try using a pen you haven't used before for your line art, or try doing the light source from a direction you've never attempted before. It's just subtle little things that will help in building up your skills over time. So I think that's pretty much it for this video. If I ever think of anything else, I might make another video, but for now I think I'm done. If anyone's interested in this character that I'm working on here, this is Kalexi, who is an original character of mine. He features in my fantasy steampunk story Breakwater, which is still in progress. I've had a lot of questions lately about whether you can read my books yet. No, they're still all in progress, and I will let you know when they come out. So thank you for your interest, but nothing is done yet. So yeah, this is Kalexi. I'm just redesigning him at the moment. I'm redesigning a lot of old characters, so I may make some videos about that, because I've got characters that I made 10 years ago that just really desperately need an update. So yeah, that's just, I decided to redesign him and also practice Clip Studio at the same time, because I'd never used it before. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Really hope it was useful to you, and if you have any comments or feedback, let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!